At last, the memorable 7th dawned upon us, bright and serene. Not a ripple upon the broad expanse of water to disturb the accuracy of fire from the broad decks of that magnificent armada. 2 o'clock had now arrived, when I noticed our men coming out of the fort, which they had bravely defended for 4.5 hours against fearful odds. The Battle of Port Royal, it is true, has been lost.
On November 7, 1861, Confederate forces were defeated at the Battle of Port Royal, one of the first naval battles of the Civil War. Hilton Head and later Beaufort and Port Royal fell to Union troops. Planters abandoned the Sea Islands and thousands of enslaved people escaped from bondage. Hilton Head Island became the headquarters for the U.S. Army's Department of the South. By February 1862, there were over 600 former slaves seeking refuge in Union Army camps on the island. Major General Ormsby Mitchell proposed to create a town for the escaped slaves on Confederate General Thomas Drayton's Fish Hole plantation. The town was called Mitchellville.
We're standing on Hilton Head Island in the encampment of Mitchellville. It was a freedmen's village built in November of 1862.
These were people who were descendants of slaves who'd been enslaved in this country for over 400 years, never knew what it was to be free. But when General Ormsby Mitchell gave the direction that this town should be built, that it would be a great experiment in freedom for people.
Mitchellville was a very large, planned, built community. It was at least 2 miles long by about 1 mile wide, several hundred houses. Just this part of the site we're working on now had at least 36 or 38 houses on it.
The new residents of Mitchellville set to work building their own homes. They built a church, elected town officials, developed laws, and required every child to attend school. Mitchellville was the first self-governed freedmen's community in the United States.
So they built a town, which I understand had broad boulevards, houses were on quarter-acre lots. They themselves built the houses that they lived in from the materials that were given to them by the United States Army. And to think that they were the ones who created the first compulsory education system in the South.
The people of Mitchellville worked for the Union Army during the war and the subsequent occupation. When the Army left Hilton Head in 1868, most jobs went with it. Mitchellville soon declined from nearly 3,000 residents to just a few families. By 1880, it ceased to be a town. By the mid-1950s, only Hilton Head's older residents remembered Mitchellville and its important history.
The story of Mitchellville never really went away. However, over the years, as older persons died who were more familiar with more historical details, it was passed on to others. However, it was never really pushed very, very hard. There's still a need to reacquaint the current new generation. All of the new residents of Hilton Head need to be totally aware of the rich, true history of Hilton Head.
In the 1980s, archaeologists found remnants of Mitchellville and recorded it as an archaeological site. The site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1988. In 2012, extension of the Hilton Head Airport runway required archaeologists to return to Mitchellville and study areas that would be affected by construction.
There's a lot that we know about Mitchellville, but there's very much that we don't know. We have good maps of Mitchellville as it was laid out, as the streets were laid out in a grid and the houses were built on it. There were different buildings, but we don't know specifically where each building was. We know where some of the stockyards and the cattle pens and different facilities were, but we don't know if individual houses were actually constructed. Was this a concept map that this was the plan that they intended to build, or is it actually what was built? It was simply the map, a document of what was actually there in 1864. That's one of the research questions that we're trying to answer out here on our archaeological site.
Although photographs, maps, and historical accounts give us glimpses of Mitchellville, there are many questions about how the town was built and what day-to-day life at Mitchellville was like that only archaeology can answer.
So we're here at part of the historic Mitchellville. And what you see around you is a series of 2 meter by 2 meter excavation units put together in what we call a block. We're trying to uncover as much of this house that we think is here as possible.
Not much. What we're finding is where these houses are or where the artifacts are. In some sites there's stuff scattered all over the place. That's not the case in Mitchellville. Mitchellville is really maybe 20 years at the most of occupation, and then it's gone. It's dissipated as a town. That's another question. You know, did some people live on past the 1880s, and where did they choose to live?
Features are soil stains, architectural remnants, storage pits, and garbage dumps. Archaeologists discovered 85 features at Mitchellville.
You see the nice sharp edges on this? This is a hole that's been dug and then filled full of garbage, some other thing. We've scraped off that plaza on that overburden. This tan soil has never been disturbed by humans before. This soil has. That's a filled-in hole. So
Archaeologists want to know about the social and economic choices people made, the kinds of household goods they had, the kinds of foods they ate, and how they organized their homes and lives.
You had people that were moving from enslavement had nothing to a free market economy. They had to spend their money on food and clothing and the things that everybody needs to live, but they're having money to spend. They had disposable income for the first time. So one of the interesting questions that we as archaeologists want to know is, what were they buying? What did they choose to buy with their money? That's something that we don't really know.
Artifacts are objects made or used by people. They are the clues archaeologists use to understand activities that happened in the past. Over 20,000 artifacts were found at Mitchellville.
this is, I found this in the back there. This was neat. Anybody know what that is? That's an inkwell.
Oh, wow.
That's a little inkwell. So remember the story of the children were required to go to school? I mean, think about what that means to people that by law were not allowed to read and write. And now they get to read and write. And so these are the kind of artifacts that tell a tremendous story in an exhibit, and we can tell that kind of thing. So even though it's a small thing, it really allows us to connect with people of the past.
The field investigations are just the first step in the work being done to study this portion of Mitchellville. All of the data and artifacts gathered during this work will be analyzed and interpreted. The results will be presented in a written report that can be shared with other researchers and the public.
I must say that when I visited the archaeology site, I was awed. I didn't expect to see the expanse of work that was going on. And when you think about all that's being uncovered, I felt as if I was on hallowed ground.
I'm a person that I have to see and touch. And when I have something tangible in my hands and I can just feel it, and I was able to share that yesterday with having a piece in my hand, it was amazing. It was amazing.
In the future, the Mitchellville Preservation Project plans to develop an extensive living history park to interpret daily life at historic Mitchellville.
So what I see Mitchellville being is a place where students in all of the schools in Beaufort County can come on field trips and experience what it was like then.
We're very pleased that Mitchellville, as seen today, is coming alive again in history, in reality. There is a great need for Mitchellville story to be in the textbooks, and of course to become a major part of the American history, a part of the history that all Americans can enjoy and continue to appreciate, because we see it as the dawn of freedom here on Hilton Head.